little different this time. Definitely still using our scripture because we believe that we need to use the scripture every day in our lives to enhance it. But today we have Brian Dillman. He is with Tech Tactical
Tactical.
Insurance Advisors.
Yep.
And so he's going to talk to us a little bit just about what we can do with our finances so that we can do better in life, become more financially stable, and so forth. But while we're here, real quick, share the podcast, share this episode, and then follow me on social media. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. I air live on Facebook and LinkedIn as well as YouTube. So click share, please follow, tell your friends about it. I promise you it's going to really bless someone. Okay.
Except for today. You're not live today, and it's my fault, and I apologize.
Oh, no, it's fine. All right. So the scripture that we have chosen today is Proverbs 21, verse 20. It's real short. It says, "There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spends much." So I picked this scripture just simply because it made me think of all the times I went shopping on Amazon and Shein and everywhere else, and then had to go and return all my purchases because I realized, oh my gosh, I have bills. I'm being foolish right now. So if anyone out there, especially the ladies, if you love shopping sprees, this will be a great episode for you to make sure that you're able to enjoy that, but also make sure that you're secure in your finances. And so Brian, I know you have the scripture. Just out of curiosity, what is it that may have crossed your mind when you went over it?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that because obviously I didn't know that scripture that you were going to have me discuss that till today, and I've been having a mock small group with a couple friends of
Mm-hmm.
mine, and we are reading. It's not necessarily a biblical book, but boy, there's a lot of biblical principles in the book, and
Mm.
it's called The Science of Getting Rich. And it
Hmm.
was written back in 1910 by Wallace Wattles, and it really talks about living God's abundant life
Mm-hmm.
and kind of giving the scriptural mindset of money and what it means, and the fact that God has given us the ability to earn that living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that God does have an abundant life in store or in mind for us. It's a matter of it's up to us to manifest that life,
Yeah.
because obviously He gives us free will as well. And a lot of times, I think people with free will make bad choices.
Yeah.
they don't always get a they don't always get to enjoy that abundant life that God does have in store, and it's a shame. So I think the wise have wealth, meaning if we're good stewards with the resources that we have and
Mm-hmm.
we follow God's prompting and teaching, that I think that uh, we will and can have that wealth. And I think it's the foolish man that spends all he has. I know that Dave Ramsey teaches that in his course. I used to
Mm-hmm.
do a Bible study for a couple different churches by Larry Burkett, and same thing. Everybody thinks it's money is the root of all evil, and that's not what the Bible says at all. It says the love of money
Uh-huh.
is the root of all evil, and I think as long as we keep our priorities straight and not putting the emphasis on money, sometimes there's opportunities that open up. So that's kind of my feeling on it, but it is pretty poignant that we would be doing that study right now in the middle of all this. So
Yeah. Great timing.
yeah, yeah.
Great timing. So you said basically looking at money management. What would your advice be to someone who wants to get to a place where they're financially secure? Maybe they feel like they don't have enough funds. Could it be that maybe they're living above their means?
Sure, sure. I think that again. I don't want to keep hitting other studies, but when you've
Mm-hmm.
you've taught the classes enough, it starts sticking to you.
Teach us, teach
Well,
us.
first of all, it is baby steps. You know, everybody wants, we kind of live in a microwave world right now where people think that they can just have it right now, and
Hmm.
it's not as simple as that. And I think that if we can slow down and be a little patient, that God's going to open doors if we're patient enough and faithful enough to see those doors open.
Right.
And I think one of the keys is you hit the nail on the head. Don't spend more than you have.
Hmm.
You've got to be a good steward with the resources that you're given, and if you're given a little, you've got to be a good steward with a little, and that little could eventually grow into a lot. But you definitely have to employ disciplines, and just being thrifty and not spending it as quick as you make it is huge. And right now I'm trying to teach my 24-year-old son that. He was in the military, so he's got a lot of toys that he likes and wants to buy. And boy, when he gets a paycheck, it's spent before he gets
It's
it because he's
gone.
got
Yeah.
all these things he wants to do. And he, since being back from Italy, you know, he's now not in the military anymore, and he
Hmm.
believes he's staying at the Hilton, you know, the Hilton by mom and dad, and he's probably about to get a dose of reality that, you know, okay, this isn't permanent. We need to start thinking about future plans.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the good thing is he likes living with you. So
Yeah, he probably likes it better than we do. Love my kids, but you know, we waited a long time to be empty nesters.
no, I hear you. It's funny. I would have to ask my parents. So for those who don't know, I owned a house in Indiana. I still own the house. But I got a job in life transitions and I ended up in Ohio. And so I moved in with my parents to save some money. Now that we're talking about money, perfect. So I'm curious. I'll have to ask what it's like to go from being an empty nester to then your child coming back into the home. Like, are you antsy and waiting for them to get back out? Are you just happy they're there?
It's a mixture for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we were tickled to death when he was coming home because he was over in Russia when that whole ordeal broke loose,
Mm,
and so we were fearful that, you know, and as a young man being in infantry, we thought he could certainly be called up, and he was deployed over there for a while, up until about 4 days before the invasion. And for some reason, they sent him back to his duty station, and he was able to stay away from the combat, you know,
mm-hmm.
that was getting ready to ensue in Ukraine, obviously from Russia. And now he's just on inactive reserve. So with everything that's going on in Israel, I mean, we've got
Yeah.
a we could potentially have a mess on our hands. But
Yeah.
hey, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, I'm not going to get into
It is nice to have
politics.
him home, but at the same time, ready to see him spread his wings and thrive
Hmm.
on his own.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I know we're talking about money, but in a sense, your investment as a parent, right?
Oh,
So investing in him all of these years to now seeing a return on that. And it's very similar to finances. Like you said, that we live in a microwave society. And so things can't just happen like that. We have to learn how to save, we have to learn how to invest.
yeah.
The concept, I'll throw another scripture on you, reaping and sowing. You reap what you sow. And when you think about reaping and sowing, when you sow something, it takes a while for it to begin to harvest. But when it's there, it's like amazing to go ahead and reap. So, my question as far as building wealth, because of course you have to save in order, you got to put money in to get money out. What would you say um, is one of the best ways? Well, I shouldn't say one of the best ways. I personally think that one of the best ways to invest would be through insurance. So, my question to you is, what are some ways that we can go about doing that?
Sure. You know, obviously it depends on what stage of life you're in. There's a lot of
Hmm.
questions that have to be asked. And as an advisor, you've got to be careful that you don't give the answer before you know the questions or you know the
Mm,
situation. And I think that knowing where somebody is in their life helps you tell that story a little better. Certainly, life insurance is a vehicle in which to save money. It's
mm-hmm.
not the only vehicle, and certainly I don't think it should be the only vehicle. I think it should be a maybe a small portion of
Okay.
a bigger picture because it's a lot safer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anything about portfolio management, you have certain investments that are more aggressive, all the way down to investments that are very conservative and very methodical and slow moving, but very
Mm-hmm.
reliable. And I think insurance kind of acts in that space. It's a little more reliable. It doesn't build as fast. It's not like a penny stock that you could invest, $100 in and make several thousand because it just blew
Mm-hmm.
up. That's not how life insurance was designed. Life insurance, like any insurance, was designed to put you back to whole, and that even includes your family. If you're a breadwinner, and in today's society, I'd say both parents or husband and wife are both breadwinners.
Mm-hmm.
So it was meant to replace that income that would be lost by the remaining spouse.
Yeah.
Since then, there are a lot of hybrids and different types of life insurance that now allow the living to benefit from that as well. And that's, I think, what you're alluding to is some of the living benefits that
Yeah.
are.
But I do want to touch on what you said about leaving something for your spouse or whoever your beneficiary would be. I was just telling you, and I'll share it with you all. I have seen so much death lately. Um, it's widespread. You know, I feel like I'm getting a text or a call every other week or every week, really, that someone has passed. And some of
Yeah,
these phone calls are heartbreaking because they're wondering, how am I going to pay for the funeral? How
right.
am I going to pay to bury my child or my mother or my, well, cousin in some
Yeah,
instances? And you'll see either just total despair or the desperation of getting things like GoFundMe, which I don't knock GoFundMe. I think it's a great resource. However, how much easier would it be if you already had something set aside
yeah,
to take care of that? And it doesn't cost much for the most part, you know, a
yeah.
month. I would say on average for my age would be what, I'm
I mean,
32.
yeah, you're young and healthy, and
Yeah.
there are insurance policies out there that could protect your family and
Hmm.
your family's family for 40-50 bucks a month.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of unbelievable that you can exchange small amounts of money for great big amounts of money,
Hmm.
but that certainly is an option. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly is.
So why don't we talk about the types of insurance? You know, there's some people that push strictly one over the other. I personally think it's important to explore all your options and see which one would best fit your needs.
Yeah,
And of course, that's tailored to you. So we can't
right.
get on here and say get this policy, right? Because it just depends on your situation. So I know a few just thanks to my insurance background. By the way, he mentored me, guys. He's an awesome mentor. But just the different types of insurance, if you don't mind just going over them briefly for
Sure,
those who don't know.
sure. There's really three kinds of insurance. And depending on what talk show host you listen to, there could be only one type, but there are three types. And you got to be really careful. Number one, I don't want to just be a windbag and keep going here, but
Hmm.
um, you got to remember that the folks that are talking on these radio shows and these TV shows, they have to be generalists,
Hmm.
because they don't know your particular situation or my situation. So
Right.
they really have to be careful to kind of hit the masses. And so when they talk about what you should and shouldn't do, it's kind of a misnomer in the fact that they don't know what situation you're in to give that advice. And
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that some that say term insurance is the only way to go, there's definitely situations where that's not always the case. So I already spoke about one, and that's term insurance. That's basically the life insurance that they say you rent that life insurance while you're alive. You rent it. You're buying insurance on your life
Mm-hmm.
for a term of time. And whether that term is 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that depends on you. Obviously, the more
Mm-hmm.
years you get coverage, the more it's going to cost you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could go out and get a 10-year policy right now, probably for $20 a month. 20-year policy might be $35 a month, and a 30-year policy, it's going to be $50 a month. I mean, as you increase the increments of time, what it's going to cost you also goes up.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of that term, that policy disappears. So, what I normally talk to my clients about is how much longer do you have that you're going to be in the workforce, that you're going to be bringing home an income? And if that
Mm-hmm.
number, like for me, it's probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years that I will still be in the workforce. So, if I was going to go out and look for a term life insurance policy right now, I would probably want to make sure that I get it at least for those 10 remaining years of my employment to replace that income so that if I passed away tomorrow, my family, my wife would still
Mm-hmm.
have what would replace my income.
So
But at
you,
the
s- I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but at the end of that 10-year term, it disappears and all the money I've paid into it is gone. The insurance is gone. And, but hopefully it served its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
second,
So,
oh, go ahead.
just on term, a question that I've asked in the past, and I know some people either ask or they don't understand. Why is it important to get a term life insurance? Let's say if your company is offering an insurance policy.
Okay, here's where we start getting into opinion.
Okay.
And in my opinion,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to sell anybody a life insurance policy here, so my opinion is just my opinion. You should not rely on an employer's life insurance policy. The good thing about an employer's life insurance policy is the fact that it's cheap and you're guaranteed coverage. So
Hmm.
if you're a fat old guy like me, I'm going to qualify for a policy to where if I went to get it on my own and had to go through underwriting, which is the group of people that determine if you are
Hmm.
worthy of their policy, they're a little more picky. And when they see that, oh, this dude's 56 years old as of Friday, and they say, he's a little portly. He's not that young, stealthy marathon runner.
Hmm.
They could deny me coverage. Where if I'm in a group setting, I'm guaranteed coverage in that group policy. However, even though term insurance is rented, basically, you don't own that policy. And if something happens, and it will, that you do not remain at that job long term,
Hmm.
because we live in a world that it's 3.5 years is the average tenure, then you're going to walk away from that job and you're going to lose that insurance. So let's just
Hmm.
say, for example, we'll use me for an example. Let's say I work for a big Fortune 200 company, and one of the things in their offering to me in the package, the benefits package that I really like, is the fact that I get $1 million insurance,
Hmm.
$1 million life insurance policy on me. And in year two, I become diabetic. And year three, I develop high blood pressure, maybe high cholesterol. Year four, I'm no longer at that company. I no
Hmm.
longer have that $1 million life insurance policy. And now I have diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol, so I can't replace it. I've become what you call uninsurable. where if I would have purchased my own life insurance policy for 15, 20 years, even though I left that employee in 3 years, I've still got a life insurance policy for my family. Does
Okay.
that make sense? So
It
I'm not
does.
trying to knock the people that have life insurance through their employer. Good for you. At least you've made a good positive step to protect your family. But I would
Mhm.
encourage you to take a look and see if there's something out there that you could own, and find something reasonably priced, unless there's health issues that just, forbid it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So we've touched on term. You mentioned there are two other
Yeah.
policies that we can consider depending on our situation. You mind just going over those for me?
No, not at all. Of the three kinds, the most expensive and the most secure type is probably whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and whole life is just that. It covers for your whole life. So whole life insurance is there for when you need it. Term insurance is there just in case you need it. And hopefully, if you do need it, it's in that period of time that you have the coverage.
Right.
But whole life is also the most expensive. And I'm going to use general terms here, but if a term policy was $20, a whole life policy is going to be $60. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's more than double a lot of times in cost, but that policy is going to be yours and cover you until you pass away.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's 5 years or 50 years, it's going to always be there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to also build, and this is where you start getting a glimpse into that investment, that living benefit as well. It starts to build a cash value. That whole life policy starts to build a cash value. It's in a guaranteed fund that the insurance company invests on your behalf, and it's a predetermined amount that they put in that account every year, and it's built into your premium. That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons your premium's higher. And they know that over time your risk factor is going to be greater, so they've built that into the premium as well. That's why it's so much more expensive. And there is the opportunity to grow a cash value. You're not going to get rich on that cash value, and you're not going to be able to retire on that cash value. But if you've got a policy for 30, 40 years, depending on how much it is, you might have 10, 15, $30,000 in there at
Mm-hmm.
some point in the future. So what happened, I'm probably going to get my dates wrong, but what happened, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s, is the actuaries got together and started to come up and develop a different kind of insurance called, um, universal life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And universal life insurance is it's kind of the platform between the term and between the whole life. So it's not quite as expensive as whole life, but it's certainly not as inexpensive as term insurance, and it's very flexible. Universal life was meant to be flexible. So if you need it to act as whole life and to cover you until you die, then it's going to be a little more expensive, but you have the option to choose that. Um, there's so many kinds of universal life policies. We could almost have a 3 hour conversation on it. But
Oh wow.
universal life allows you the freedom to overfund it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to try to keep it general enough so I don't go in the weeds here. But so let's say your life insurance premium is $50 a month for this universal life policy, and it's a $200,000 life insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, you have the ability to overfund that policy, meaning that if your premium's 50, you can choose to pay 150 or 250. And what you're doing is the $50 that it costs to maintain that life insurance is taking care of the cost of insurance, the COI, the cost of insurance. but also you're putting an extra $150 a month in there that's going into that bucket that's kind of acting as a savings account. So you're building that bucket of, or that savings account. You could, if you chose to, build it
Hmm.
much quicker than what a whole life policy would, but you have to overfund it. If you just bought a stripped down version of a universal life policy, it's going to cost you less money to maintain the life insurance like a whole life policy. But if
Hmm.
you want to build that cash value, and that's what most people start touting when they start talking about um, life insurance acting as their investment. That's when the bank of you comes into play, right? There's people that buy new cars with the cash value in their life insurance policy,
Hmm.
and then they just pay the payment back to their life insurance policy because the interest is going right back to them, and the interest is usually a point and a half, 2.5%. It's very cheap money, and when you pay that premium, that payment back to pay off that loan that you took out, you're paying it back at 2.5% as opposed to 7% that the banks are charging.
Mm.
In fact, let me. Ugh, sorry, I've got a book. This is a really good book. It's called The Retirement Miracle by
Okay.
Patrick Kelly, and it is a phenomenal book on tax-free retirement. And
Hmm.
a good part of the tax-free portion of the retirement is because of life insurance. It talks in here about being the bank of you and how you can utilize those different policies to do different things, and he really goes into depth. But as you can tell, it's not a very thick, it's not a big read.
Hmm.
It's a very easy, very short read, but he does a lot better job talking about those three types of insurance that I have, because there's so many moving parts. So I hope I gave those three things justice.
Yeah, I mean, we last thing we want is to go into the weeds. There's so much more information that I know that you could give out. I've had some experience. I was in insurance for 2 years. First Medicare, then I did Medicaid. I've done life insurance, touched commercial, but it wasn't my thing. So I could probably go into more depth as well, but don't want to do that to you guys today.
Yeah,
Uh, but
yeah. Even my wife, she'll ask me a question. By the time I get done answering it, her eyes are glazed over, and I think
yeah.
she's been asleep for 15 minutes.
It can be a lot.
Yeah,
It can be a whole lot, but I think the most important thing to know is that with life insurance, when you're covered, and you're able to make sure that when you pass, because that's inevitable, we are all going
sure.
to die one day. Sorry if I rained on your parade, but when that happens, you want to make sure that the people that are left are able to take care of your body. All right.
You're called to do that. You're
Yeah.
called to do that biblically.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, will you expand on that?
Yeah, you're going to ask me a verse, and I'm not going to be able to give it to you.
No,
But
it's okay.
it does say in the Bible that you're supposed to leave something for your children and your children's children,
Mm.
and that's part of that being a good steward with the resources that God's given you. Um, Obviously, money is a tool in which we can accomplish certain things for His glory, and I mean that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
intended for. It's not to go out and buy the new speedboat. Not that you can't, but you're supposed to use that for His glory.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, but yeah, you're called to leave something to your children, to your family, to not
Mm-hmm.
have that be a financial burden to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, definitely, we want to do that and get that taken care of. But also, you get the chance to invest in yourself. I know you, Brian, just talked about being able to use a whole life policy, for example, taking a loan out of that
Hmm.
to go do whatever. you need to do. Now, of course, that builds over time. So it's not a microwave, it
That's right.
takes time, but it's a great way to invest in yourself. And you can do the same, I believe, with the universal life, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do the
Yeah. I
same
think if
there.
you're wanting to build something for retirement, that's going to probably be your best
Hmm.
option because there's so much flexibility with it.
Yeah.
And that's where I say that book will really help in explaining that more in depth. But
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. So definitely have that noted. I have become a reader lately, thanks to school. So I'm reading textbooks for school. I'm reading other books to complement the textbooks because half the time I don't know what the textbooks are talking about. Um, and so now, I'm thinking, if I have all the time to do this, I can cut off Netflix for an hour or two and
yeah.
read something. um, but definitely going to look into that book. There's another one that came across my mind. Hopefully, I'll remember it. Um,
Paychecks and playchecks.
no, it's
That's another
Rich Dad, Poor
by
Dad, Rich
Robert
Dad.
Kiyosaki.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another good one.
Yeah.
I started reading that. I think I got about halfway through, and I was reading that prior to starting school. So you got to pick that book back up.
Great
Um,
principles are taught in that as well. That's been
yeah.
revised
Oh, okay.
now that we're, what, 20, 30 years
Hmm.
further ahead or in a different world. It's there's a revised copy that kind of touches along things that we face today.
Okay.
So, and that's good as well.
So tell me why did you get into the insurance agency? I know he does. By the way, he does more than life insurance. He's done auto. He's done what is trucking and commercial. So just a little bit of everything. He's a well of knowledge. So my curiosity is, why did you choose this industry?
I'd love to tell you I chose it to help people and to be a blessing and a resource. But to be honest with you, I was a sales manager for a Fortune 200 company.
Hmm.
Um, Made a great living, but was on the road 3 weeks out of the year
Mm.
and had my first baby and basically was asked and pleaded with to find something that would keep me closer to home.
Okay.
I lived out of a hotel 3 weeks out of every month, so I was almost
Mm.
non-existent at home. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I'm not a sales manager or I'm not working for this company, what would I do? I mean, I can't
Hmm.
imagine. I don't have a college degree, and I'm just a North End hood from central Indiana that used to get in trouble in high school. There wasn't a lot of people waiting at my door to knock it down with opportunity. But one thing that I had started teaching myself was the stock market.
Hmm.
It's something that always intrigued me. It's something that I always really wanted to dig deeper and learn how it worked and because I always saw all these clicker numbers in the newspaper.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. They used to, they'd have the clicker numbers and the symbols and up arrows and down
Yeah.
arrows. I was like, man, that's almost like shorthand. I wish I could read that. I wish I knew what that
Hmm.
meant. So I taught myself the stock market and I became kind of a quasi day trader in the options market.
Okay.
It, anyway, I loved it. And I thought, man, I bet I could teach the people in my church how to do the same thing. We went to
Hmm.
a big church, and as I started, it's kind of like anything that you follow and spend time on, you're going to have conversations around it just in the normal course of
Right.
doing life. It's either sports for guys or it's, which it never was for me. Uh, Still isn't. In fact, I go to small group meetings with my group of group guys that we meet with, and they're over there talking about sports, and I'm like, I think I'd rather be at the women's table talking about the things I know because I was
Yeah.
raised with my mother. Not a father, so I just didn't know that world. But I taught myself the stock market, thought, man, I wonder if I could teach this to other people. To make a long story short, that's what I ended up doing. I ended
Mm,
up becoming a financial advisor, and I got my state and securities license to act as a stockbroker, an investment advisor. So I could help advise people on investing their 401ks and things like that.
mm-hmm.
And I did that for, gosh, almost 20 years. Um,
Wow.
and it wasn't until 13 years ago, approximately, that I was approached by an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, would you be interested in taking over this book of business for an agent that's getting ready to retire? And he really needs somebody that, kind of knows financial services and could come in and service his book of business. And that's what brought me into insurance. So it's not a big, like I say, I wish it was more of I wanted to help people in the insurance world. I honestly didn't really have a big interest in insurance. I did finance. I did the money management side, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought that an insurance agency was nothing but a lot of maintenance and just something I didn't want to get involved with. But I did see the fact that this book of business had about 1,200 clients, and if they
Wow.
buy insurance, some of them probably did financial planning and investment.
Mm-hmm.
So I did both. I kept my financial planning practice and opened the insurance practice. And what I found out is I really loved helping people. And I loved helping people develop the resources to take care of their families
Mm-hmm.
and to help them when they hit a crisis. I'm pretty empathetic, and I could understand frustration and heartache, and I related well and helped people through a lot of that. It's kind of my ministry now, but it didn't start out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 2.5 years ago, I hung up my financial license. I decided I didn't want to do it anymore at all. So I transferred that book of business over to a young man that just got into the business about 10 years ago. He lives his life for the Lord, him and his family both. And I turned that over to him to manage. I don't have anything to do with it anymore. I just do insurance full time.
Wow.
So I wanted to touch on something you said. I don't know where we are
Sure.
on
No,
time,
it's
but
fine.
um, so a few years ago, which is hard to believe it's been that long, I lost my best friend. In fact, I don't
Mm.
know, Jasmine, if you remember this story or not.
Yeah.
So Brian was my best friend. And of course, my name is Brian. That was by design. Both of our moms had been friends, or are
Oh,
still,
wow.
but had been friends since they were, I don't know, 5 years old, kindergarten. They had been lifelong friends. And when they grew up, they had decided that if they ever had sons, they were going to name them the same name because they were going to live together and be sisters, and they were
That's
going to raise them to
hilarious.
be brothers. And it just so happens that, be careful what you wish for. So
Mm-hmm.
his mom, Linda, had Brian the year before my mom, Linda, had her Brian. Yeah, you couldn't write this any better. And so we basically were born within a year
Mm-hmm.
apart, and we grew up together. Our moms were best friends. We became best friends. Again, I could take a different path down every story, but so I lived in Florida while Disney World was being built. In fact, I lived on Disney World property. My dad was a pipe fitter that put together a lot of the piping for some of the water rides at Disney World.
Hmm.
Well, Brian and Linda lived there with us, and I mean, he was just a part of my life growing up. And he passed away at 55 years old, and he was playing PS3 or something with his son, 11-year-old son. They're sitting on the couch. He got up to go into the kitchen to get a drink of water, and as soon as he hit the floor, stood up, he hit the floor laying down.
Mm.
He just had a heart attack. His heart exploded, and he was no more. And that was a rough. I mean, I had people that I knew in school and things like that, and even family members. But man, he was the closest thing I really had to a brother. I was an only child, so was he, ironically enough. And that one hit close to home, and the struggles that ensued after. And he had a great job. You know, he made a great income, but of course that day his income stopped,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a young kid, he had grown kids, he had a wife, he had responsibilities, and the income stopped. And he didn't have, in my opinion, enough insurance. I'm not going to get into the details of what he did or didn't have, but I should have done better as a best friend. Here I am, I spend my life helping people understand the importance of life insurance while I let my very best friend go without me saying, dude, I'm not taking no for an answer. Let's get this in place. I didn't push hard enough. So when you talk to an insurance agent, if they've got a story for you like that that really hits them where it hurts, and they push a little harder than maybe you feel comfortable with, give them a little grace, because maybe there's a reason they're pushing. They
Mm-hmm.
know what happens when people go and it's not in place. And I'll tell you, I said from that point on, I will never have a client or a family member that I don't push. If I feel that they don't have enough and they need more, I'm going to push for that family that's left here to pick up the pieces when something happens. I love you, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this is what you need, and this
Right.
is what we need to put in place. I understand there's constraints with money, but that's how I got into insurance. That's why it's a passion of mine. And was that the answer you were looking for?
Oh, that was more than what I was looking for. That was awesome. It's always great to hear the backstory of someone's, well, I can say this, but someone's ministry,
Yeah.
and why they do what they do. One of the reasons I started this podcast, for example, it started out with just Facebook statuses, and I was noticing that people were really liking them. And then I started posting a video, and I'm getting all these comments like, wow, I really needed this. I needed this. And I said, well, I know tons of people who could really, have an impact on others and share the knowledge that many people need. And so,
Yeah.
boom, here's the podcast. Let's just get together, talk about ways to help people, and because of my faith, I truly believe that there are biblical principles to help you carry through that. Um, so
And
it's
very
just
few
amazing
people
to
know
hear.
insurance.
Yeah,
Very,
very few.
very few.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you learned that for the moment that you were into the auto and home.
Mm-hmm.
How many people, when you explained coverages to them, were like, holy cow, I never knew what that was. I just counted
Right.
on my agent to tell me what I needed, and rarely
Mm-hmm.
do they. What they tell you is what you can pay in order for them to get the account. If I can beat what
Right.
you're being charged right now, even if the coverage is horrible, you're looking at that bottom line thinking, wow, I could save $10 a week. Yeah, let's
Mm-hmm.
do that. And you've just given up half your coverage that, yeah, yeah,
If something
nobody,
happens, you wouldn't have enough. Right.
nobody understand. I don't want to use that generality. Few understand what the coverages truly cover and what they have in
Mm-hmm.
case of, God forbid, something tragic happens. And it doesn't
Right.
have to be death. Car accident. I mean, sometimes that's a lot more financially tragic than death can be, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
did find that Bible verse. We were talking about Proverbs for your household, 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an
Mm.
unbeliever. God calls
Wow.
us to be responsible with our finances and to be good stewards. Now, what we choose to do with that is on us, but it certainly is one of the most talked about subjects in the Bible. Obviously, love is right up there, but handling our resources and being a good steward and money is right up there as
Mm-hmm.
being talked about. I mean, look, think about it, tithing, you know, um, being a good steward with the look at the talons, the story of the talons, where
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just goes on and on. You can't serve two masters. You either love one, hate the other. He's talking about money, and yeah, it's talked about all through the Bible, and we should pay attention to that. I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think God talked about it that much by mistake. I think there was probably a reason.
Yeah. So, just as we end here, I always like to end with a word of encouragement. So, what would you encourage someone? Let's say they've watched this podcast, they're more interested in learning how to one protect themselves, but also invest in themselves. But maybe they don't have the necessary funds to start.
Sure,
So, what would you encourage them to do, and what that roadmap could look like moving forward?
you can start anywhere.
Mm,
You can take small steps, baby steps. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to all be today. Get yourself out of debt. That's one of the biggest.
yeah.
Don't be don't be bound under that gauntlet of debt, because that will stop you from being able to do so much in your life, and to be able to live debt free, believe me, feels a lot better than being buried in debt. um, and it's kind of amazing the blessing that you can be to other people when you've got blessing to give. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, baby steps, get out of debt, and then start saving money for an emergency fund. Put money back that's going to get you out of a jam, that's not going to break the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Build that emergency fund to the point where, and Financial Peace University coming back to me, get 6 months worth of income put back in the bank. Don't
Hmm.
do anything with it. Work on getting that money saved, and then look at, okay, now what can I do and still maintain the ability to pay my bills, bless others, give as God commands us to give. um, what can I put in place to now start building
Mm-hmm.
for the future? It's baby steps. It's not getting discouraged or down on yourself because you can't do it today, because few people can.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, thank you. You guys heard it firsthand. Make sure you're out of debt, that you're saving, and eventually, when you're ready, able to invest so that you can reap your harvest, reap what you've sown. But thank you so much, Brian, for coming on today. I truly appreciate you. It's always
Yeah,
great to
you're
see you.
welcome. It is great to
So,
see you. And I would just encourage everybody to find somebody that you can trust
hmm,
and have them have the conversation, have them explain the details and get you started doing something. It pays to shop around and get somebody
yeah,
that I mean, like they always say, somebody like, and trust.
yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, that's all we have for you guys today. You guys be blessed. Take care. As always, if you need prayer, feel free to inbox me. I'm always down to pray with you or pray for you. And let's just do what we can to protect ourselves and invest in ourselves. It's been great seeing you guys today. Take care.
Take care. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Brian.